Policy to discuss the implications of the Reserve Bank's moves. We're now joined by the President of the Confederation of Indian Industry, Bhartia, and Deloitte India's Chief Economist, Shanto Ghosh. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us. Bhartia, let me come to you first. You at the CII believe that the rate hikes that the Reserve Bank has been undertaking, and in fact this amounts to the 8th hike that the Reserve Bank has taken since March of 2010, have not really brought down inflation. So you truly believe that this cannot be a problem that can be solved only by monetary policy action, and you believe now industrial growth is going to be severely or significantly impacted. Is that right?
Yeah, as you know, this is the 8th hike, but the inflation was affected by grain, then we had food and vegetables, etc. But today globally in the last 6 months that we have seen higher commodity prices and now very high oil prices. So I think on the inflation front, and the demand continues to be quite high. So we don't see inflation can be controlled by increasing the interest rate. Now the other thing that is an indicator of very high interest rate is also probably higher than what we talk about in repo rates is the deposit rates. The deposit rates are in the range of 9 to 9.5%. Now that shows that the banks are short of money. Now that's not a good indication. Now in such a tight situation, the only thing that can get affected is really the investment part. And today, as of now, the demand continues to be high and we need to build capacity. The investment rate looks good right now, but going forward there could be pressures on investment. So I think that is of concern to us. Even though on the budget, if you really look at the fiscal side, government has said the government borrowing is not going to be higher than what they had seen last year. So that is not a pressure. But overall, the high rate of interest could be a deterrent for further growth in investment and building capacity, which is really desperately needed.
Right, Bhartia, let me just add to the point that you were making. Now it seems to be evident from what the Reserve Bank has articulated in its policy today that a further hardening of rates is going to happen. A May hike is given, as Lata was pointing out, and perhaps even a June hike. Given that scenario, how soon do you think it is going to start impacting investment activity? How soon is the industry going to find it difficult to fund investment activity? And do you think we're now closer to missing that 9% growth target that's been set out by the government?
I cannot give you a timeline because so much depends really also on demand side. Now, one of the things that government can certainly do is really quicken up larger projects, because what happens is if you clear the large projects, at least that will further spur some larger investment. Now that could be one way to increase investment. But I think we need to continue to watch the demand side, because ultimately, the demand has not an unlimited elasticity towards inflation. Because if inflation continues to be strong and interest rates are high, I don't know how demand will be perceived in the future. I think we need to watch that carefully. Lata made a very good point, but I just differ on one thing, that the Japanese nuclear power gets mainly replaced with not with oil but mainly gas. Gas has been excess in the Middle East, because the US prices of gas has been quite low. US has been importing less gas, so that to some extent the gas prices may harden up a little bit. Gas supplies have been good, so I think that hopefully the oil prices, even though refineries are shut, so may not go up that high, in my view, so just because of Japan.
That's what we're hoping for. But let me get Shanto Ghosh in on the discussion. Shanto Ghosh, the Reserve Bank of India finds itself in a bind. On the one hand, it's dealing with inflation as enemy number one. The upside risk of inflation continues. It's upped or revised upwards its inflation target to 8% from the earlier 7%. On the other hand, it is acknowledging the fact that there are now emerging risks to growth. What is the Reserve Bank supposed to do in this situation?
I think that's a very pertinent point, and the Reserve Bank does face a daunting task. I do want to make a couple of observations. You know, we are looking at the inflation number right now for February numbers. It's at 8.3%. But if you really look at the wholesale price index, and if you look at it for this fiscal year, for 11 months of this fiscal year, the wholesale price index inflation is actually at 5.57%. So, you know, I think there is a little bit of an upward bias in the inflation numbers, and I would dare to say that if the Reserve Bank does nothing, if it just continues with its current policy, and if the trend of prices continue as they are, we are going to see an inflation number of 5 to 5.5% in a couple of months' time. So I think, you know, according to me, there are two questions. Increasing this interest rate, I think, is going to be detrimental for our growth. And although the interest rate was along expected lines, I do believe that this was a good time for the Reserve Bank to adopt a pause, wait-and-see approach, particularly because we are facing so much global uncertainty on our growth prospects. So I think compromising the future growth potential, slowing that down, is really going to be a far worse scenario, because I believe that inflation will taper down.
If I can interrupt you here, the Reserve Bank has already been accused the last time around of being behind the curve. So if it hadn't moved on this one, perhaps, you know, we would have had more in that camp that believed that the Reserve Bank was behind the curve, given the kind of inflation that we're contending with.
Well, it's always easy to, you know, look back and, you know, point fingers. But I'm just saying that if you look at the numbers, right, I think there is an upward bias in the inflation. And, you know, the Reserve Bank has done a fine job. I think it is right now important to ask, you've increased interest rates 7 times in the past. Clearly, that has not had a very perceptible impact. So somewhere, this policy, this monetary policy of changing interest rates, trying to affect inflation by changing interest rates, is not working. So I think the Reserve Bank, you know, is beginning to run out of options. You know, people are beginning to question, is this really the right monetary policy tool to be able to target inflation?
So my final question to both you and Hari Bhartia, and let me come to you, Shanto Ghosh, first. The Finance Ministry seems to be running out of options. You're saying the Reserve Bank is running out of options because 8 hikes down the line, it still hasn't been able to tame inflation. What are we dealing with here then?
Well, I think, you know, honestly, 6 months down the road, we would not be talking about inflation. That's my point of view. And I think inflation is on a downward trajectory, and that will continue. There are bigger concerns that we should really be occupied with, and that's coming on, you know, directly impacting our growth prospects. So I think right now, no one should do anything. Let's just wait and see. I think generally, unless there is a major shock which drives the oil prices to, you know, more than $150 a barrel, unless something major happens, I think the current trajectory will automatically stabilize inflation.
Okay, Hari Bhartia, my final question to you. In a sentence, do you think that the Reserve Bank should adopt a wait-and-watch policy and not hike rates, at least not in May?
I completely agree with Mr. Ghosh that we should not look at increasing interest rates, because I don't think that is going to control inflation. And I fully agree that I believe the inflation is going to come down now, because we cannot continue to see the increase in commodity prices as what we have seen in the last 6 months. Oil will stabilize. I don't think oil doesn't look like going up to $150. Nobody can predict. But I think these are already very high prices, and I think we should wait and watch.
Okay, let's wait and watch. Hari Bhartia, Shanto Ghosh, appreciate you joining us here to discuss the implications of the Reserve Bank's credit policy on CNBC.